All right, thanks guys. Thanks for joining in for another user group. If you're still around, we're going to get through to accounts and formulas. Thanks for filling that poll as well. Majority are somewhat comfortable, which is great. Hopefully we can tick over to very comfortable after this session maybe, or some that aren't comfortable or have never even tried, get a bit of an exposure to creating their own accounts and dabbling in some formula writing as well. So that's what this session will be about. Let me just close this poll. Cool. So what I'll start off with, I guess, is just by explaining that the ability to create accounts and define formulas, it's quite vast. There's a lot of different options we have available to us, a lot of different flexibilities, and they all sort of suit a particular purpose, a particular method that we're trying to calculate a particular account, and that's where the discretion of us as consultants comes into play. We pick and choose which tools we want to use to get the right outcome for the right piece of data. I'm not going to go through every single option that we have when it comes to defining formulas and accounts. What I will do instead is just to go through a particular type of account, and that is more around the company-wide KPIs, the more simpler, to the point style formulas that are consistent across all business lines, and they don't really change across time. So I'm talking about your net margin, your debt to equity ratio, and another example which we'll go through today is sort of a cost per FTE KPI as well. So they're very high level ones that your CEOs or your reporting managers might come in and look at Adaptive and say, oh, can we get this account or can we get that account? And then you have to scramble to find a way to get that into your report or into your dashboard or what have you. So I'm going to just run through, I guess, a typical scenario. I'll go to one of my reports over here. I've got a really simple payroll report happening at the moment. Now what I've got is some payroll costs over here, just some basic GLs and an FTE number as well. And so if we're looking at perhaps a KPI that has the payroll costs divided by FTE, trying to derive some sort of cost per FTE, what I might do, if I do have some experience in creating calculations, is in the web reports sort of modify area, I might go into calculations and go custom. I might drag that out and go to formula assistant. I see, okay, there's payroll. I'll add that into the formula. I'll put a / I've got FTE there. Yep, I want that one divided by that. Press OK. I might name it cost per FTE, and I might run it. So that's a really simple scenario. That was really easy to do. And I assume that most of you, if not all, have had that sort of experience before of sort of, fumbling your way around building a report and getting a result. I've got my cost per FTE of, let's say, 24,000 for the first month. Whilst it's really easy to create and set up, it does come with limitations. And so one of them being, I have no idea whether that's the right number. I'm just assuming that 24K is 3 million divided by 123. I can't really validate that unless I'm going into Excel and copying and pasting the numbers in and validating myself. There's no explore cell on these particular numbers. So the window that Brenda was going through before, of digging down to the lowest detail and seeing a formula being, I guess, defined, I don't have that flexibility when it comes to custom calculations in a report. I have no links there. I can't drill down. So this drill to feature, this is a bit of a red herring. If I go into level and run that, I get an error message. So drilling down onto a custom account also doesn't work. So there's that issue. The second issue is I've got this KPI here, but what if someone else wants to use that account for another report? Or what if I have a dashboard that I want to use that account? And I try to recreate that formula, and it's sort of up to me to make sure that that formula is the exact same. And that might be easy if you're the one who's creating that formula, but if someone else, a colleague of yours, wants to use that KPI, maybe they try and create it themselves and they do expenses divided by FTE, or they do payroll cost divided by headcount instead, and there's this mismatch of data. You sort of want one central location where you want to define your account and your formula to then reference in reports or in sheets or in dashboards or if it's Connect. It just makes for a more consistent and efficient formula writing process and reporting process. So to that end, we'll talk through an alternative to creating this particular custom calculation, and that is creating an account. And so if I go into modeling, tick. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this sort of menu here. Our account section, I take it most of you would be familiar with the general ledger section. So I can go into this and see my general ledger account. I'm going to make a new one or make any edits, go into here. But it may be news to some of you that you also have custom accounts and you've also got metric accounts. I'll ignore assumptions for now. I'll sort of focus on these two. This is where we can sort of define our own accounts and assign formulas to those accounts. They're created centrally in this sort of window, and then, as I sort of tried to illustrate before, referenced in reports, dashboards, what have you. So I'll jump over to metric account just for a tick, and I will show you what I have there. And now that can also be accessed. I might just take a step back. This metric accounts area can also be accessed from this list here. So I go into metric accounts, I've got that same window, but I can also just as easily sort of navigate to other types of accounts with this drop down. Anyway, here's all my metric accounts. The accounts here, they have a name and they have a code. There are also ones down below that have no code, and they also have this sort of arrow next to them as well. That's indicating to you that it's a group. And so you'll find that as you create more and more accounts for different purposes, logically, you want to group them according to that purpose or that business area, which is what this demo instance is sort of trying to do here with your financial KPIs, your other KPIs, employee-based things, and that nature. So I guess when it comes to groups, you've got a button in the toolbar here, create new group, and I can name it whatever I want. And go from there. I don't need to make a new group in this example. I've already got, just so happens, a group called employee metrics, which is great. It's got a few different metrics here, and to be fair, it actually already has a payroll cost per FTE in this. I think it's in that group here. We're going to disregard that and obviously make our own one instead. So what we'll do is, if I have a group that I want to add an account to, I'm going to click on that group. And this very first button in the toolbar up here, I hover over that and I see it says create new account. That's great. And I'm going to go give it a code. Codes need to be all one string. You can separate it by an underscore, and that's about it. Or you can use capitalization as well to sort of differentiate different words. I tend to use underscores more frequently than just capitalizations. I'll go cost per FTE. My name can be whatever I want. I can put spaces in there as I need, and the name is what I see when I use the reports as well. This code is kind of an adaptive necessity, but the name is what you see on the front end of your output. So that's my code, that's my name. I know that it's a part of the group that I want because it says rolls up to employee metrics. That's great. If I want to change that to some other group, I can click on that drop down and change it to a different group. It's fine. I can give it a description as well in case someone comes along and wants to know sort of in English what this account is supposed to do. Payroll costs divided by FTE, and I can say per workforce model as a description, just to help out with communication between the team. So that's sort of the high level details of the account. Now, the actual formula, the purpose of this session is to assign a formula down here. So underneath data type, you're going to see a formula box right here. And that's where we define a formula. So whenever you define a formula, whether it be in metric accounts or custom or wherever, you're going to see Formula Assistant down below, and I encourage everyone to use it. I've been using Adaptive for coming up to 4 years now, and I still use the Formula Assistant in just about every single scenario. There's a lot of advantages to using Formula Assistant, which I'll touch on now as the window pops up. So what I've got is every account in the model, just in a list there that I can just reference straight away. The syntax is all spelled out for me. I don't have to try and remember what the account codes are of other numbers that I want to reference. They're all there for me. Commonly used functions are also at the top there that I can reference as well. And it also validates the formula. I won't get past this window if my formula doesn't have the correct syntax. So I'll show sort of those features as I go through the formula. What I want to do is have my payroll costs, which is over here I can scroll down in this big list. This is all accounts, or I could find the account with this drop down. And there's a lot of options here. I guess when you're looking for GL based accounts, which we are when it comes to payroll costs, I'm going to find it in its root account. And so I know that payroll costs come under the expense root account, which is here. But if I wanted to find an income account, it'd be here. An asset account, it'd be up there, or I could go into current asset or non-current. Same with liabilities, you get the picture. GL based accounts, they belong to their root account. Or if you're game enough, you can just scroll through this big long list and use the search bar to help you. But what I'll do is I'll jump to expense, it's under operating, there's my payroll. I click on that and it appears in this window. I don't really have a name for what this window is. It's underneath account term modifiers, and I'll maybe explain later what modifiers are, but for now, we're not putting any modifiers on the account. It appears in this window. I need to get it to this formula window here. I can click on this green tick and it's in. Syntax is perfect. I can end this formula right now if I wanted to. It's already spelled out for me. I don't need to worry about anything. I can bypass that extra click by, let me just delete that from the formula box. I can double click instead of single click and it goes straight there, which you often do. If you don't need to put a modifier in, you don't need to use this window here. If I just want the account straight into my formula, I'll double click. Now, I want my payroll costs divided by my FTE. And if you recall, when I put that description in, I said it was the FTE per the workforce model. And so what I want to do is try and find that FTE account. It's my workforce model. Basically, if you're looking at a planning model, generally speaking, you either have a model sheet or a cube sheet as your planning model. You may not know which type of sheet your workforce model is, or let's say revenue model or CapEx or whatever, you might not know. So you can always use, I'll go back to all, you can always search for it in the search bar and type FTE, and sure enough, my FTE account appears. If I scroll up, it'll actually give me, okay, I know it's from my workforce planning model, that's the name of my sheet, I'm in the right spot, and lo and behold, it's under the modeled section. So I can sort of find out whether my workforce planning model is a modeled sheet or a cube sheet. And so if I know that information already, I can go to, in this drop down, modeled. Here are all my modeled sheets: workforce planning, capital planning, prepaids. These sheet names obviously are specific to this model. They'll be second nature to you as you go through this formula assistant window. You'll know your sheets in your own model. You'll see which ones are modeled, and conversely, you'll see which ones are cube as well. Sheet name appears in the gray. The accounts in that sheet appear in the black. You've got the code, the name. So that was a bit of a diversion, but to get to my FTE account, I can go into my modeled area because my workforce planning sheet is a modeled sheet. I can see it's the very first one. Here are all my accounts. I want FTE, and where I can double click, I can go payroll divided by FTE. And that's my formula. This formula will work fine, but keep in mind that if FTE is 0 and you divide them by 0, it's going to give you an error. And so we want to sort of bypass that. If you're used to using division in Excel, you'll often put an if error sort of function around it, and then type in the A divided by B sort of structure. How we couple that in, or how we sort of attack that in adaptive, is we use the function divf. I want to type in divf with an open bracket. Divf, the function, has 2 arguments. It has the numerator as the first account, which is my payroll, comma, denominator, and I close bracket. Really simple function, very similar to Excel. You have the function name, open bracket, and you fill in arguments, numerator, comma, denominator. Now I'm telling you this off the top of my head, but in case I didn't know what FTE, what divf is, I can always look for it in this function area. There's div, we don't care about div, we want divf. I can click on the question mark, and sure enough, divf n and d, or n comma d within brackets, n being numerator, comma denominator, and it spells it out in English what this function does. But as you use it more and more, you're going to know off the top of your head that divf takes numerator, denominator, two arguments. So that is how to divide one number by the other, which happens to be what the formula is. But in case I want other mathematical functions, they're all going to be the same as Excel. If I want one times by the other, then I can use the asterisk, I can use plus, I can use minus. They're pretty straightforward. But for now, we'll use divf one divided by the other. Your common KPIs, if you want to present it in percentage, you're often going to be using this divf. So I'll use this as the example. If I have time later on, I might jump back to other functions, but for now, divf, numerator, denominator, payroll costs, FTE, and I can go, okay. And there's my formula in there. I know that it's correctly specified because it let me get through that window. If I go back to my formula assistant and I miss a comma or miss a bracket, you can see that pop up at the top there, expected end bracket after function divf. Couldn't be simpler what I've stuffed up there. Click OK, add the bracket, and away I go. Very hard to have formula errors if you use the formula assistant and you get past the formula assistant window. So there's my formula for cost per FTE. I hit save, and there's my metric account. At the very bottom of my group, I can drag and drop as I wish and put it at the top if I want to. And there's my cost per FTE, centrally located in metric accounts, centrally defined, available to reports, dashboards, sheets, whatever. And let's demonstrate that by jumping back to my report here. In fact, let me just add in the name metric. You'll see why in a second, just to differentiate between my original custom calc here. I'm going to jump back to modify report. And my metric account is going to be under accounts. I've got all my possible accounts here. If you recall, this list, very similar to this list. So as far as finding accounts, it can be reconciled between, okay, where's my account in this area? I know where to find it when I go up to here. I know it's in metric. I know it's under my employee metrics. And here it is, the very first account in this group. I can drag and drop and run. Cost per FTE, metric account, exact same result as my cost per FTE before. Benefits to the metric, just to reiterate, the account is centrally located in the metric account area. If I want to use it in another report, I can. I don't need to worry about having to redefine that formula. There's no risk that it's going to show a different result, or if someone else wants to use that account, they can certainly do so, and be confident that it's going to give me the same result. So I can certainly go into a brand new report and go into accounts, repeat the process, and straight away I can use that without having to redefine. I can also go into dashboards and reference that account. I can go into Office Connect and reference that account. I could even add it to a sheet as well. So I can do all those things based on the account that I've essentially defined. I also have a hyperlink in this number compared to this number here. You can see the cursor is moving a little bit. I can click on that number and I can better sort of figure out now, mind you, Cell Explorer is appearing in a different window. If you just give me a moment. This is the Explore Cell window. I can actually properly audit my function now. I can see that it's giving me payroll divided by FTE, 3046001 and 13.29. Okay, I remember those numbers. I can actually go back to my report and confirm, yep, okay, it's the exact same values. I know what it's calculating. I know it's correct. I don't need to go into Excel to try and validate any of that stuff. So Cell Explorer will tell me that it's doing the right thing. I've got 3046001 and 123.29 as my FTE. This is calculating correctly. And just as an aside as well, drill to also works. I can drill to level, and I've got that sort of breakdown if I need be. So that is the really basic advantages to creating a metric account. It's reusable and it can be audited as well. So two key benefits to that. That was really it as far as a really simple metric account. If I have a few minutes, I've got probably 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sure Jess will cut me off if I do go over time. I might jump back to my account that I've defined over here, and I might go into just talk a little bit about the, I guess, customizations that are available to me. First off, even before we go into this particular formula, if for whatever reason this formula changes for a different version, I can handle that. By default, it's the same formula across every version, but if I need to, I can use this version drop down and use the override and define a completely new formula. This is a new functionality that was, I think, in a previous release, maybe started this year or the end of last. Metric accounts used to be every level, every version, no exceptions. They now have this flexibility of changing the formula by version if you need to. So accounting for changes, which is great. So for this working forecast, I can change this override formula to whatever I want. If it's a slight nuance going forward, I can account for that. And then future versions that are a clone of this version here will take on that new formula. That's a key, I guess, flexibility up our sleeve that we can use. I'm going to jump back to our original formula and just talk about a couple of areas in this window here. So I guess just to reiterate, as far as enhancing our functions or making the most of this formula assistant window, the functions, commonly used functions, are up here. Now, as far as reporting KPIs, divf is going to be your most commonly used one. You've got brackets, you've got a few different mathematical ones. I mean, these are really, you can get quite specific mathematical ones that just never get used in practice. From experience, divf is the most commonly used. You've got a couple of rounding ones that chop off decimal places if you need, rounding up and rounding down. You can look at these particular ones and look at the description to get a better info of what they do. But round up and round down is here. Max and min are here. They all have different names in Adaptive as opposed to Excel, but you'll learn which means what. Greatest being max and least being min. You got a few different there, and you can always just look at the information, the question mark, to get a bit more description. There will be an article as well posted alongside this that I've linked a couple of articles. Sorry, a couple of different adaptive documentation pieces that better explain formulas. I use it from time to time if I need to when I'm building, not necessarily reporting KPIs because they're fairly easy, but more for planning models. If I'm looking at a particularly complex formula, I might look at that sort of glossary for more info. Definitely encourage you guys to look at that and a couple of different other articles around accounts and the formula assistant window as well.
Troy, sorry, can I just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
So Joe's just asked if we could run through when you would use custom versus metric accounts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess to add to the confusion, the article that I was referencing there will actually go through custom accounts. The assigning of a formula is just about identical. The structure is identical as far as this window here. The behavior of the account is the key difference. So without getting bogged down in too much detail, metric accounts are more formula intensive. It's going to calculate at every single intersection, including the roll up. And so we, generally speaking, I reserve metric accounts for when I want to divide one by the other. The reason for that is, I guess I'll use a common example. The easiest example I can think of is, let's say you've got gross margin percent as a metric across 5 different business areas, and they range between 20 and 40%, let's say. And you want to present the gross margin percent of the entire group. You've got 5 different gross margin numbers across your business. If you define that account as a custom account, the custom account will take those 5 gross margin percentages and either sum them up, which is useless. You're going to get a gross margin of over 100%, or it's going to give you an average, also fairly useless as well. You want the formula to reevaluate that gross margin formula at the top level. So you want to be at the group level. You want to take revenue. You want to take gross margin divided by revenue at the top level. Metric accounts will do that, and so we definitely use it for percentages when we're doing one divided by the other, and also more simpler formulas. Again, it's very calculation intensive. So if I have a big complex formula and 5 different metric accounts in a report, I might see a noticeable difference in the performance of the report. So with that in mind, I'll create a custom account instead if the roll-up behavior needs to be or can be a sum of the child. That's not the case when it comes to percentages. You really want it to be reevaluate at the top level, because a sum of different percentages is useless. An average is equally not ideal either. So I'll use it for metric accounts. It's a bit complex to try and explain off the top of my head, but as simple as I can make it, that's the difference. So summarize, very simple functions or divided by functions, leave for metric, which I've walked through just now. Any other accounts, let's say total FTE or total headcount. There's nothing simple or nothing complex about this formula. It's A plus B. I would have this as a custom account just to save a bit of, I guess, calculation time. The one thing I hate in reports is it running slow. So I like to eliminate that as best I can. I would probably make total headcount, total FTE as custom accounts. Put that aside. If I want some sort of A divided by B sort of calculation like I've done here, cost per FTE, I'll leave it as a metric. That's as simple as I can make it. But just to reiterate, defining custom accounts, and you'll see it in the article if you take a read, is identical. You've got groups, you've got accounts, and if I just jump to one of them, I can define a formula there. The one benefit or key difference to custom accounts, it can be data entry. So there's no formula on here or in the shared reports. It actually implies that it's a data entry account, not a formula. So I would encourage you, if that doesn't make much sense, I would encourage you to read up a little bit more or send me an email, something I can explain it, but simply put metric for divided by or simple KPIs. For more complex formulas or data entry, leave for custom. How they are structured, very similar. Their behavior on the sheets, very different.
Excellent, thanks for that, Troy. Now, thanks everyone. We are going to open up the floor for Q&A. Troy said on the line we've got a good question from Naresh. Sure. But just before we do, for those of you that can't stick around, thank you so much for attending. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or feedback. If you're willing to stay around for some Q&A, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. But in the meantime, Troy, I've got a question from Naresh. Naresh, I will unmute you in just a sec. But the question was if you could demonstrate formula functions such as like nested if statements with and or.
Yep, sure. So if I go into my... So the first thing about if statements in adaptive is that they are structured identical to Excel, which is great. So any experience with Excel in terms of if functions can be directly translated into adaptive. So as far as walking through that, that might not be too, I won't go into too much detail because I assume that you guys have built if statements or nested if statements in adaptive. But if I jump into my cost per FTE and jump into Formula Assistant, you can see if I go function and jump out of mathematical and go into logical, if appears, and I can go into the detail here and see, yep, looking for a true or false expression in the first argument, the value of true and the value of false, pretty simple. The one difference that I've forgotten to mention as I've explained that is that oftentimes you'll see if, but you'll also see if with an extra F, and adaptive just simply put says that the difference between the two is the extra F is for fast. And so the way it evaluates the statement is more efficient using double F. I'm not going to explain why, but adaptive do try and explain it in their documentation. So if you can get used to it, I would encourage you to use double F, IFF. And so you can always just go if payroll is less than 0, then 0. I don't want that to evaluate. Else, do that calculation that I had before of payroll divided by FTE. And then you have a couple of different brackets to navigate around. You've also got the color coding of, not color coding, but some highlighting of the brackets to make sure you don't have too many parentheses on there. So I've put one extra bracket there, that becomes red. I'll remove that, becomes green. We're all good to go. And press OK, and it doesn't even work because I'm not really paying attention. Payroll, comma, and there it is. And nested ones, you can just put in more if statements in there. I won't jump through that, but I assume that you guys have experience in Excel when it comes to if statements. Exact same in adaptive, just add an extra F if you can remember. But if you forget, again, it's still a valid formula in adaptive anyway. So that's ifs. The and the ors, the difference is in adaptive, it actually works a bit better than Excel. You define ands and ors in the same way that you speak in English. So if you can imagine and statements in Excel, it's like and open bracket statement 1, statement 2. In adaptive, you actually go, here's the first statement, payroll is less than 0. I can just type in and just put in a complete other statement like net income is greater than 0, which is a lot easier to read than having the and the or statements in Excel. So this is structured more like an English statement, an English sentence, whereas Excel's a bit more, technical. That is the same for or as well. Hopefully that answers your question, but it is also available in this commonly used functions over here, and or and not.
So the question tries, is that evaluate the same way as Excel? So it's need to be true to get the
yes. Unless you do an or statement in it. So if it's and, both statements need to be true. If it's or, at least one of them needs to be true for the true statement, for the true expression to appear.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no worries.
Excellent. Han, we had a question from you now, if you want to unmute yourself.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to stay in the Q&A.
Oh,
no worries.
Not a problem. Were there any other questions?
Sorry, try. Is it a lookup is the same?
Lookups are a bit different. You'll have to sort of speak to one of us to sort of work out how you want to define that. It actually can be a bit easier than a normal VLOOKUP. If you're looking at a dimension in adaptive and you want that particular, so if I want a particular, dimension value and I want the rate as the same dimension value, then you may not need to define any function at all. It really depends on the purpose for it. You might be best to speak to us in terms of lookups, but it's certainly not a VLOOKUP or index match sort of thing that you'd find in Excel. The dimensions that you build make it a lot easier to do lookups based on a particular value. So perhaps get in touch with one of us and work through the use case to get through that.
Okay, thanks.
No worries.
Excellent. Well, given the time, I think we will wrap it up here. But thank you everyone so much for attending. Thank you to both Brenda and Troy for their presentations. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. We are more than happy to help you out. Any feedback as well is always welcome. Now we will be releasing a write-up on the session as well, so keep an eye out on our website and LinkedIn for that. And have a good day.
Thanks all. Thanks for attending. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.